There's no deal until there's a deal.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Friday he had made great progress during a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. But no peace deal was reached on Ukraine in the nearly 3-hour summit. The two presidents left with a vow to meet again.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know.
It's not clear whether the talks had produced meaningful steps towards a ceasefire in the deadliest conflict in Europe in 80 years, a goal that Trump had made at the outset. Trump and Putin spoke for a few minutes to reporters and took no questions.
I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them.
Putin said he hoped the agreements reached at the summit could be a launchpad for settling the war and restoring ties between Russia and the U.S., though he didn't specify what the two sides had agreed on.
I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir.
This was the first time the two had met since 2019. For Putin, the summit was already a big win, regardless of its outcome, signaling Moscow's return to international diplomacy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was not invited to Friday's summit, said that the meeting should open the way for a, quote, just peace, but added that Russia was continuing to wage war. A Russian ballistic missile earlier struck Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region, killing one person and wounding another. An estimated 1.2 million people from both sides have been killed in the fighting, Trump's envoy to Ukraine said earlier this year.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Saturday Ukraine should make a deal to end the war with Russia because, quote, Russia is a very big power, and they are not. His comments follow the summit in Alaska, where Vladimir Putin was reported to have demanded more Ukrainian land. In a later briefing with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, a source familiar with the talks cited Trump as saying that the Russian leader had offered to freeze most front lines if Kyiv ceded all of Donetsk. The industrial region is one of Moscow's main targets. Zelensky reportedly rejected the proposal. Trump also said he had agreed with Putin that a peace deal should be sought without the prior ceasefire that Ukraine and its European allies have demanded. The stance will be welcomed by Moscow, which has said it wants a full settlement, not a pause in fighting. Zelensky said he would travel to Washington on Monday to discuss the next steps with Trump. European leaders have also been invited to attend, a person familiar with the matter told Reuters. Trump met Putin for nearly 3 hours in Alaska on Friday at the first U.S.-Russia summit since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Russia's forces have been gradually advancing for months. In the capital Kyiv, residents demanded progress.
Well, it was another blah, blah, blah. It was expected and everyone knew how it would end. And the predictions were unanimous. It turned out that way. And what do we expect? We expect really serious actions. In this case, from Trump, from him personally. And this could be just pressure on Russia.
Analysts say the war, which is the deadliest in Europe for 80 years, has killed or wounded well over 1 million people from both sides.
Две огромные супердержавы и, соответственно, всегда их сближение.
These are two huge superpowers, and their rapprochement, or on the contrary, their repulsion from each other, is always in trend.
Хочу сказать, что любое событие, касаемое встреч, там каких-то.
And I wanted to say that any event related to meetings, or, I don't know, summits, it always suggests material that will be collectible in the future.
Который будет в дальнейшем коллекционным.
The Canadian government on Saturday moved to end a strike by Air Canada's cabin crews and require binding arbitration to resolve their contract impasse. The move comes after thousands of unionized flight attendants walked off the job shortly after midnight over a wage contract dispute. The strike forced Canada's largest airline to cancel all 700 of its scheduled flights, affecting more than 100,000 travelers who had to find alternative flights or stay put. Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu said at a news conference she had asked the Canadian Industrial Relations Board to impose binding arbitration on both sides and immediately end the strike.
After 8 months of negotiations and weeks of intensive mediation, Air Canada and the Canadian Union of Public Employees flight attendants were unable to reach a tentative agreement. The government firmly believes that the best deals are reached by the parties at the bargaining table, and we will never stop believing that.
Air Canada had asked Prime Minister Mark Carney's minority Liberal government to act. The Canadian Union of Public Employees, or CUPE, which represents more than 10,000 Air Canada flight attendants, said it wanted a negotiated solution. Earlier in the day, hundreds of Air Canada employees formed a picket line outside Toronto Pearson International Airport.
I'm absolutely heartbroken. It's not something we want. We want to be flying. We just want to be compensated fully and fairly for all the hours that we are at work.
The carrier had previously offered a 38% increase in total compensation for flight attendants over 4 years, with a 25% raise in the first year, which CUPE said was insufficient. But the most contentious issue has been the union's demand for compensation for time spent on the ground between flights and when helping passengers board. Attendants are currently paid only when the plane is moving. Hajdu said Air Canada indicated it would take 4 to 5 days to resume full operations.
More than 300 people have died in northwest Pakistan after 2 days of intense rains and floods, local officials said on Saturday, with more still missing. Cloudbursts, flash floods, lightning strikes, landslides and the collapse of buildings caused the most deadly spell of this year's monsoon season. Located a few hours north of Pakistan's capital Islamabad, Buner district is among the worst affected areas in the country. At least 184 people have died there, according to local officials, and many more remain trapped by floodwaters. Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar highlighted that both civilian and military teams were engaged in rescue and relief operations, with emergency funds released to aid those efforts. The devastation isn't limited to Pakistan. Parts of neighbouring India and Nepal have also been severely impacted by heavy rains and flooding over the past week. The heavy rains are expected to continue until August 21st.
In the misty heights of Spain's Picos de Europa, cheesemaker Encarnacion Bada makes her way through the damp stone-walled caves where her family's Cabrales cheese has been maturing for generations. Last year, one of her wheels fetched 30,000 euros at auction and earned her a Guinness World Record for the most expensive cheese ever sold.
Yes, of course. It really does feel good to win the prize, but then you think about everything that comes after. You have to have cheese to sell, because it makes you mad if they come looking for cheese and you don't have any.
Cabrales, a pungent blue cheese protected by a European Union designation of origin, is still crafted largely by hand in a handful of mountain villages in northern Asturias. For generations, women like Bada have been at the heart of this tradition, carrying the work from barn to cave, hauling curds up steep trails and tending the cheeses as they mature in cold, humid caverns. But the craft faces an uncertain future. fewer than 20 certified cheesemakers remain, most working on a small scale, and many younger Asturians have left for other work. Bada doubts anyone will replace her when she retires.
When I stop, when I retire, I don't know who will be left because there's no one to take over.
For now, her daughter-in-law, Eva Gutierrez, still shoulders the arduous climb.
It's a way of preserving a culture, a tradition that our grandparents and our parents taught us. I'm continuing with it, and I hope my son will too.
There, the wheels rest for months in natural limestone caves, absorbing the unique microflora that gives cabrales its sharp, tangy bite.
Please rise if you are able to.
I'm a product of war. Internment camp. Because of the Pearl Harbor, were interned without any due process. Hiroshima, because of the war, they had to end the war and they had to drop something awful like atomic bomb. And coming back, this country and going to Vietnam War, of course, it's another war, actually physically faced it. And afterwards, after coming back, you still face the war. You still face the end results. I still take medication, so many medications to stay alive. You don't know what peace is until you fought war. How gory it is, how terrible it is, how different you become as a person, and how much it costs the taxpayers because of the war. And really, really, peace, you cannot buy peace. It's priceless.
I think we come here to play and to win. It's a competition, but some of us are researchers at our universities, and so we're interested in research. And of course, you can test a lot of interesting, new, exciting approaches here in this context, because let's say I have a very interesting idea. I can try it in my hobby with my friends who are also very good at programming and mathematics and all that. And if we try something and it doesn't work, we lose a game. That's sad, but it's better than, let's say, investing a lot of money into a product and then this fails.